With the release of Netflix's new mystery horror series 1899, we thought it would be a good time to look into a few sea-borne mysteries that may have served as its inspiration. We begin with a strange tale from 1761. The Octavius was a schooner charged with ferrying cargo between London and the Far East. The long journey to China is said to have gone well, and after unloading the goods they had brought from Britain, they loaded the ship with cargo heading the other way. The weather on their journey had been, for the most part, clear and unusually warm. Encouraged by this, the captain decided he would try something that to that point had never been achieved. He would attempt to sail back to London via the Northwest Passage, a sea route between the Atlantic and Pacific, cutting through the Arctic Ocean. Pack ice typically rendered this route untraversable, but the captain hoped the hot weather had cleared the ice enough for the Octavius to cut a way through. And so the crew and captain, along with his wife and son, set sail. They would never be seen alive again. The ship disappeared and was declared lost. This was until 1775, some 14 years later, when it was discovered by the crew of a whaling ship called the Herald. They had been hunting in the icy waters west of Greenland when they came upon the vessel. A boarding party made their way onto the weather-beaten ship, its sails and rigging ragged and torn. No crew were found on deck, but when they made their way down into the body of the ship, they found the frozen corpses of all 28 crew, the captain's wife and his son, and still sat at his desk, quill in hand, the captain himself. The boarding party, fearing that the ship was cursed, grabbed the logbook and beat a hasty retreat. In their rush, they lost the middle section of the log, but had the first and last pages. Apparently, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the ship had become trapped in ice and the crew had perished. The ship's last position in the log put it at roughly 250 miles north of Wainwright, Alaska. At some point, the ship had worked its way free and continued along the passage before being spotted by the Herald. After making their way off the ghost ship, the Herald crew simply left it adrift, and it was never seen again. A more recent but no less intriguing case is that of M.V Joyita. By 1955, the M.V Joyita had had quite the life. Originally built by Wilmington Boat Works in 1931 as a luxury yacht for film director Roland West, the Joyita was named after his wife Jewel Carmen, Joyita being Spanish for Little Jewel. By late 1941, the ship had been purchased by the US Navy and docked at Pearl Harbor weeks before the fateful attack. During the war, the Joyita was used as a yard patrol boat, patrolling the waters around Hawaii. In 1948, the ship was sold to the Lewis brothers and refitted for civilian use, and eventually found itself in the hands of anthropologist Dr. Catherine Lumala, who chartered the boat to Captain Thomas Miller, who would use it as a fishing and charter boat. To that end, on October 3rd, 1955, Miller, along with 16 crew members, 9 passengers and cargo, set off from Apia, the capital city of Samoa, on course to the Tokelau Islands. They departed at 5 a.m. with the 270-mile journey expected to take up to 48 hours to complete. The trip had already been delayed by a day as the clutch on one of Joyita's engines had failed. The ship would ultimately leave Samoa with a single working engine. On October the 6th, a port on the Tokelau Islands reported that the Joyita was overdue. and despite no distress signal being received, a search and rescue mission was quickly initiated. Aircraft from the RNZAF, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, covered a search area of over 100,000 square miles, but to no avail. 5 weeks later, the captain of the merchant ship Tuvalu spotted the Joyita listing heavily some 600 miles west of her original route. On board, it was discovered that all crew and passengers were missing, along with much of the cargo. A radio on board was tuned to the International Distress Channel, but damage to the cable leading to the aerial meant it had a range of just 2 miles. All life rafts, a dinghy and firearms Miller kept aboard the ship were also missing. However, a doctor's bag containing blooded bandages were found on deck. The ship was very obviously heavily damaged, and barnacle growth above the usual waterline meant it had been in this state for some time. Clocks on board, powered by the generator, had all stopped at 10:25 and light switches were flicked on, pointing to the probability that whatever had happened did so at night. Many hypotheses were put forward in the wake of the discovery. Strong anti-Japanese sentiment in the area at the time led to many theorizing that the boat had been attacked either by Japanese fishermen or a secluded military force operating from one of the islands who had not known the war had ended. With the Cold War ramping up, it was also thought that a Russian sub may have been responsible. Other theories include pirates, a mutiny, insurance fraud, and an argument between Miller and his mate leaving the ship without an experienced seaman. To this day, exactly what happened aboard the Little Jewel remains a mystery. We return to the UK for our next tale, and a story whose origin perhaps lays more in legend than in reality. The story goes that on February the 13th, 1748, a Saturday rather than a Friday, the Lady Lovibond set sail from a port on the Thames bound for Oporto, Portugal. At the time, many sailors believed that bringing a woman aboard a ship was bad luck. However, this superstition didn't seem to bother captain of the Lovibond, Simon Reed, who had brought his new wife, Annetta, along with him. The voyage was to serve as their honeymoon. As the ship left the Thames and made its way to the sea, all the crew was said to be below deck celebrating with the happy couple. All, that is, except for 2 men. A crew member who was charged with steering the vessel and boatswain and first mate John Rivers. Rivers is said to have been angrily pacing up and down the ship. He had been the captain's best man at his wedding, but he was also deeply infatuated with Annetta. The sound of the joyous couple that emanated from below fogged his mind. With every step he took on the deck of the Lovibond, his anger and jealousy grew until he could bear it no longer. In a fit of jealous rage, he took a belaying pin from the ship's rigging and struck the crewmate in charge of the wheel. He then steered the Lovibond into the notorious Goodwin Sands, a 10-mile sand bank 6 miles off the coast, wrecking the ship and killing all on board. A tragic tale, but it doesn't end there. Exactly 50 years later, on February 13th, 1798, 2 ships reported seeing a vessel with 3 masts near the sands. The captain of one of them, James Westlake of the Edenbridge, wrote in his log that he could hear sounds of celebration coming from the ship as it broke up. A team of rescuers was sent out, but no sign of either ship or crew was found. This would not be a one-off occurrence. The Phantom Lovibond would go on to be spotted several more times. Each sighting took place 50 years apart on February 13th, 1848 and 1898. with the last recorded sighting taking place in 1948 by a sea captain named Bull Prestwick, who alleged that the ship looked real but had an eerie glow. There was no reported sighting in 1998, so we will have to wait until 2048 to see if the ghost of the Lovibond still haunts Goodwin Sands. The story of the Ourang Medan is one surrounded by mystery and conspiracy. What reports there are state that either in June 1947 or February 1948, a distress signal was heard by several ships traversing the Straits of Malacca. Two vessels from the United States, the Silver Star and the City of Baltimore, are said to have received messages sent in Morse code. They read, SOS from Ourang Medan. We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead. This was followed by a series of dots and dashes that didn't make sense, before a final message simply stated, I die. It's then said that with the help of British and Dutch listening posts in the area, the two ships were able to triangulate the location of the Ourang Medan. With that, the two ships began their search, with the Silver Star being the first to the scene. Attempts were made to make contact with those on the Ourang Medan, but to no avail. It was drifting silently with no sign of life on deck. The captain of the Silver Star quickly organised a boarding crew, and as soon as they set foot aboard Medan, it became clear that the messages they had received were accurate. Bodies of the crew littered the decks, their faces twisted and frozen, staring upwards to the sun, eyes and mouths open. It's alleged their expressions were as if they had been badly frightened. The ship's dog had not been spared this fate, as it lay dead with its mouth twisted into a frozen snarl. As they made their way through the ship, they found the body of the captain and other crew members, all where the message had said they would be, and finally the body of the radio operator himself, still at his station. With no souls to save aboard the Ourang Medan, the crew of the Silver Star set about towing the ship back to port. Shortly after hitching a rope to the Medan, however, smoke was discovered coming from the number 4 cargo hold. The captain made a choice to sever the tow rope after his men had returned to the Silver Star, and shortly after doing so, the Ourang Medan exploded so violently the ship lifted from the water before disappearing below the waves. What could have caused the explosion and the mysterious deaths of all those aboard the Ourang Medan? Some theorize that the ship was carrying a cargo of potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin, a dangerous and volatile cargo to carry on such rough seas, but not one that could explain the deaths of the crew. Others speculate that it was, in fact, carrying nerve gas or some other chemical weapon developed by Japan's infamous Unit 731, perpetrators of numerous war crimes. Unit 731 was infamous for its gruesome experiments and torture. The theory further suggests that at the end of World War II, these weapons were claimed by the US, who shipped them using the Dutch-registered Medan, as using a US-registered ship would create a paper trail. And on the subject of paper trails, this leads me to the biggest issue with the story of the Ourang Medan. There isn't much paperwork to back up the story, and some of the reports that do exist differ massively in their details. Even the report from the US Coast Guard, wherein they tell of the bodies looking up at the sun, was written 6 years after the supposed event. There is certainly more to this mystery, including a recently revealed letter to the CIA that mentions the ship along with other mysterious disappearances. If you'd like us to make a video deep dive into the story of the Ourang Medan? Let us know in the comments below. The Mary Celeste is one of the most famous and well-studied mysteries of the sea. On November 2nd, 1872, the Mary Celeste, captained by Benjamin Briggs, set sail from New York Harbour, bound for Genoa, Italy. Also on board were 7 crew members, along with Briggs's wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. Before leaving, Benjamin Briggs had written a letter to his mother back home in Massachusetts. In it, he wrote, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim, and I hope we shall have a fine passage." Sadly, Benjamin's hopes would not be fulfilled. The Mary Celeste had recently undergone an extensive refit, some say to help cover up the ship's past. Originally named Amazon, it's said that the ship was at the centre of several negative events, which included a collision in the English Channel and the death of its first captain after a sudden illness. As the Mary Celeste set sail from New York and nearby Hoboken, New Jersey, the Canadian brig De Gracia, captained by David Morehouse, lay in wait for its cargo of petroleum, also bound for Genoa. The De Gracia would set sail 8 days later. On December the 5th, as the De Gracia was midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal, Captain Morehouse was alerted by his helmsman to a ship lazily drifting towards them. The bizarre movement of the ship led those on the De Gracia to quickly establish that something was not right. As they pulled closer, they could see that this ship was the Mary Celeste. But how could it be after leaving several days before the De Gracia? No crew was spotted on deck, and after their signals received no reply, a boarding party made up of first mate Oliver Deveau and second mate John Wright made their way onto the ship. They quickly noticed that the sails and rigging of the ship were in a bad way, some sails missing entirely. As they made their way further into the depths of the Celeste, it became apparent that the ship had seemingly been hastily abandoned. In the hold, they found water up to 1 meter deep, but this was not a significant issue for a ship of this size. Though, contrary to the legend, no food had been prepared. The stores had an ample amount of supplies. Crew cabins were said to be untidy due to water damage, but otherwise in order. In Captain Briggs' cabin, they found various personal items, though papers relating to the ship, along with the captain's navigational tools, were missing. Also missing was the ship's sole lifeboat. They did, however, manage to find the ship's log. The final entry was recorded at 8 a.m. on November 25th and gave the ship's location as being some 400 miles from where it now resided. With little more to go on, Captain Morehouse and his crew set about bringing the Mary Celeste along with their own ship to port. Over the decades and centuries, the story of the Mary Celeste twisted and grew, with people adding and subtracting facts in an effort to figure out why and how the ship had been abandoned. Pirates? A waterspout? Mutiny? Or aliens? All these and more have been put forward. Morehouse and his crew were also brought under suspicion at one point. Their reason for bringing the Mary Celeste in wasn't wholly benevolent. They had hoped to be paid handsomely for their efforts. First mate Oliver Deveau wrote in a letter to his wife, quote, "I can hardly tell what I am made of, but I do not care so long as I got in safe. I shall be well paid for the Mary Celeste." However, documentarian Anne McGregor believes that the key to finding out what really happened lay in the ship's log. In her documentary on the subject, she posits that rough seas and a failing water pump led to the Mary Celeste being abandoned off the coast of Santa Maria Island. The lifeboat was lost in an attempt to reach the shore. As for what happened to the Mary Celeste after this event, the ship passed through the hands of several owners, all wary of its past. Eventually, she was filled with junk and ran aground in Haiti as part of a fraudulent insurance claim. Well then, there we have it. Do you have a theory about the fate of any of the ships or crew mentioned? Or perhaps you'd like us to go more in depth on a particular story? Let us know in the comments below. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.